na naman ng linggo at muli tayong mag-aaral tungkol kay Jesus. Tawagin niyo na ang inyong mga kaibigan dito sa ating online Sunday School. Ano na naman kaya ang ating matututunan tungkol sa ating pag-aaral? Sabay-sabay natin itong alamin sa ating Bible story. Bago ang lahat, tayo muna ay manalangin. Tayo tumungo at makipag-usap sa ating Panginoon. Aming Amang nasa langit, pinupuri ka namin, pinasasalamatan dahil binigyan niyo po kami ng bagong kalakasan upang muling mag-aral ng iyong mga salita. Dalangin po namin, samahan niyo po kami sa araw na ito at upang aming maintindihan ang iyo pong mga ituturo sa amin na kwento sa aming pong pag-aaral sa Sunday School. Sa iyo po namin ipinagkakatiwala ang lahat ng ito sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen. Ngayon naman, tayong lahat ay tumayo, sumayaw at kumanta para sa ating Panginoon. Para sa araw na ito mga bata, ang ating kwento ay tungkol sa isang napakagandang babae o tinatawag na Reyna. May mga kilala ba kayong magagandang babae? Alam niyo ba kung ano ang ginawa ng Diyos sa buhay ng isang magandang babae o tinatawag na Reyna? Siya ay ginamit upang maligtas ang kanyang kalahi. Panoorin natin ang ating Bible story na makikita sa aklat ng Esther, chapter 1 to 10.
The Persian Empire was a glorious kingdom, full of riches, splendor, and majesty. The Persians had conquered the world. They invaded Israel and took many of God's people as exiles to Persia. So there were many Jews living there. The king of Persia was Ahasuerus, a mighty ruler. To celebrate his vast power and kingship, he hosted a banquet that lasted a whole week. People ate the finest food, drank the most expensive wine, and had all the entertainment they wanted. In the middle of the crazy party, Ahasuerus asked his beautiful wife, Vashti, to come before the people. He wanted to show off her great beauty. So the king's servants were sent to Vashti and told her she must come to the king to be displayed at the banquet. Queen Vashti did not want to be part of the drunken party and be disgraced like that, so she refused the king's order. This was unheard of. No one refused the king. When the king heard of this, he was furious. Who dare refuse the king? This would set an example to all the wives in the kingdom to disrespect their husbands. He had to set an example. So according to the advice of his experts in law, King Ahasuerus removed her crown, banished her from the kingdom, and declared that Persia had no more queen. When the king's anger finally subdued, he remembered Vashti and missed her. When his counselors saw his turmoil, they came up with a plan. They told the king to send out men to gather all the young, beautiful women in the kingdom and bring them before the king. This way he could choose from amongst them his new queen. The king liked this plan, and soon news spread throughout the kingdom. Throughout the empire, beautiful young girls were taken away, and after many days of beauty treatments, they were brought before the king. One such girl, Esther, lived with her uncle Mordecai. She was beautiful indeed, but she was also a Jew. After all the young girls the king met with, he decided that Esther was the most beautiful woman in all the land. He chose her to be his wife. Esther, the Jew, was now the queen of Persia. Esther was wise about her new position and kept her Jewish identity a secret, as there were some people in the land who hated the Jews. One of the king's most important officials was a man named Haman. He was a wicked man that hated the Jews. One day, Haman came before the king and presented a plan that made it sound like he was protecting the kingdom from potential enemies, but in actuality would annihilate all the Jews in the Persian Empire. Haman knew that once this edict was signed by the king, it would be irrevocable. So the king believed Haman, and the edict was signed. Because Esther kept her Jewish identity a secret, Haman did not know that she was part of the race he wanted to annihilate. When Mordecai, Esther's uncle, heard about the horrible new law, he was devastated. He and all the Jews across the land tore their clothes, placed ashes on their heads, and went into mourning. But God knew of all these things, and he helped Mordecai come up with a plan. Even though the law could not be changed, the simple fact that the queen of the empire was a Jew could somehow save them, since the king would never let his wife be killed. Mordecai then pleaded with Esther to make her identity known to the king. But Esther was afraid, as no one was allowed to appear before the king without an invitation, or you would certainly be put to death. Knowing this could cost her her life, she proceeded to dress in her finest royal clothing and went and stood in the inner court of the king's palace. When the king saw Esther, she found favor in his eyes, and he held out his scepter to her. This was the signal that the king allowed Esther to approach his throne. "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? I'll give you anything, even half my kingdom," the king said. Esther's request was simple. She wanted to have a meal with Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and the king. She was going to find a way to tell the king about Haman's evil plot. Twice, Esther held a banquet for the king and Haman, and finally, on the second night, she revealed her Jewish identity to the king and explained to him the consequences of the terrible edict that would annihilate her and her people. When the king heard this, he was furious. He stormed out to the palace gardens. When he came back, he found Haman falling on the couch where Queen Esther was sitting, and in his rage thought that Haman was assaulting the queen. Immediately the king's guards grabbed Haman and took him away. Then one of the servants remembered the gallows that Haman built on which to hang Mordecai. He told the king about this, and the king ordered that Haman himself be executed on those very gallows. Once again, the queen risked her life and went before the king uninvited. She wept and pleaded to him, for the edict would still destroy her people. The king then issued a new one that gave all the Jews in the Persian Empire the right to take up arms and defend themselves against this coming attack. When that day finally came, the Jews rose up against their adversaries and took control of them. Even the palace officials and governors helped the Jews, and they were victorious. The Jewish people celebrated God's victory and instituted a festival that is yearly observed unto this very day. During the festival of Purim, the Jewish people recall God's provision and Esther's bravery.
Bago natin matutunan ang mga aral sa ating kwento, ay pagtignan muna natin kung sino-sino ang mga tauhan sa kwentong ito. Una, si Esther. Siya ang tinatukoy ko na magandang babae na pinili lang ng Diyos upang maging reyna at upang mailigtas niya ang kanyang mga kalahi. Pangalawa, Mordecai. Siya ang tiyo ni Esther na nagturo sa kanya upang matulungan ang mga Hudyo. Pangatlo, Haring Xerxes. Siya ay hari ng Persya na pumili kay Esther upang kanyang maging reyna. Pang-apat, Haman. Siya ang lalaki na may malaking katungkulan sa Persya at mayroon namang galit sa mga Hudyo. Alam niyo ba mga bata na sa aklat ng Esther ay hindi nabanggit ang pangalan ng Diyos. Pero mapapansin natin, makikita natin na ang Diyos ay kumilos sa buhay ng mga tao sa paghahari ni Haring Xerxes. Ang buhay ng mga Hudyo ay nasa panganib na kalalagayan dahil sa pagiging masama ni Haman sa mga lahi ng Hudyo. Gusto ni Haman na mawala ang mga Hudyo dahil sa tingin niya ang mga ito ay kanyang kaaway. Kaya gumawa siya ng paraan upang ibigay sa hari ang plano na sila ay mamatay. Nang malaman ito ni Mordecai na tiyo ni Esther, sinabihan niya ang lahat ng Hudyo ay dapat na manalangin na mabuti. At dahil si ginawa ni Esther na pakikipag-usap sa kanyang asawa na si Xerxes, naintindihan ng hari na si Esther ay isang Hudyo na hindi dapat patayin. Alam niyo ba mga bata na ang lahing Hudyo kagaya ni Esther at ni Mordecai ay lahing mahal ng Diyos. Kung kaya sa kwentong ito ay iniligtas ng Diyos sa kamatayan o sa kasamaan ang mga taong ito. Maging sa ating buhay, ang Diyos ay nagmamahal sa ating lahat. Kung kaya hindi niya tayo pababayaan at hahayaan na may mangyari sa atin na masama. Kaya ang itinuturo sa atin ng kwentong ito, na kung nasa oras man tayo ng kapahamakan o ng kasamaan at tayo ay nakakaramdam ng takot, ang dapat lamang nating gawin ay manalangin sa Diyos. Tumawag tayo kay Jesus upang tayo ay kanyang ingatan at iiwas sa lahat ng kasamaan. Maraming salamat mga bata sa pagsama niyo sa akin dito sa ating online Sunday School. Tayo ay magtapos sa panalangin at makipag-usap sa ating Panginoon. Aming Amang nasa langit, salamat po sa araw na ito dahil po natutunan namin na kayo po ay tunay na nagmamahal sa amin at maglalayo sa amin sa anumang kapahamakan. Dalangin po namin na paalalahanan niyo po kami na kung kami ay nasa oras ng mga kapahamakan o kasamaan, kami po ay paalalahanan niyo na dapat ay manalangin at tumawag sa inyong pangalan upang kami po ay patuloy na maiwas sa anumang kasamaan. Patuloy din po namin idinadalangin ang buong isang linggo na dadaan sa aming pong buhay. Patuloy niyo po aming gabayan, ingatan at samahan. Sa iyo po namin ipinagkakatiwala ang lahat ng ito sa pangalan ni Jesus. Amen. Magkita-kita ulit tayo sa susunod na linggo mga bata. God bless you!